it is my honor to introduce our state senator. Please welcome State Senator Julie Lassa.
Well, good afternoon. Today we are here to remember the victims of 9/11 and one of the darkest moments in our nation's history. If you are old enough to remember September 11th, 2001, you remember where you were and what you were doing when you heard that terrorists had hijacked jet planes and were crashing them into buildings. You remember watching the footage on TV, the horrifying plume of flame of United Airlines Flight 175 striking the South Tower of the World Trade Center in New York, the people jumping from the roof of the world's tallest buildings to escape dying in the flames, the astonishing sight of the towers collapsing on themselves, and the dust-covered survivors trudging through the debris of Ground Zero. You remember seeing the gaping, burning hole in the side of the Pentagon and the remains of a plane jutting from the ground in rural Pennsylvania in a farm field where passengers of Flight 93 gave their lives to stop the terrorists from inflicting even more devastation and death. When we look back today on America at the turn of the 21st century, so very much seems to have changed. But the images we saw on that bright blue September 11th day, 10 years ago, and the horror and the sorrow and anger we felt, live on in the minds of all Americans, as fresh as if they had happened just yesterday. In the days after the 9/11 attacks, we struggled to understand what had happened to us as a nation. The reality of nearly 3,000 Americans murdered in one day left us at first stunned and then numb. The stock market tumbled, airlines were grounded, and those who worked in a skyscraper or a government building lived in fear that they might be the target of the next attack. We couldn't comprehend why we had been hit and what our attackers hoped to gain from such a vile and violent act. Our realization that the perpetrators of these attacks had been living among us, methodically preparing their hateful deeds, shook our sense of security. But even amid the fear and confusion of one of the darkest times in our nation's history, something else was going on. If we despaired at the death and devastation, we were also inspired by the courage of firefighters, police, emergency medical personnel, and everyday people who rushed to Ground Zero to help, even at the risk of their own lives. If we were shocked by the hatred of extremists abroad, we were also consoled by the tremendous outpouring of support for America from people all around the world. And if we feared for our country, we were also reminded of our love for our country. In the face of this terrible challenge, we found a sense of national unity that moved us to put aside our differences and to work together to lay our loved ones to rest and rebuild what had been destroyed, and do what we needed to do to prevent such an attack from ever occurring again. America in 2011 is a different place than it was in 2001. Of course, the war on terror continues with American troops in both Iraq and Afghanistan. But thankfully, there has not been a major terrorist attack in the United States since then. The mastermind of the 9/11 attack, Osama bin Laden, will never again plan another terrorist attack, having at long last faced justice at the hands of a team of courageous Navy SEALs. Our nation and our national attention has shifted away from terrorism to other problems that seem to divide us. It's a shame that it seems to take a horrific act like 9/11 to remind us how much we depend on one another, to show us what we share as Americans are much greater than what divides us. Our love of liberty and democracy, our sense of hope and our belief in the promise of America, our passion for justice and our sense of duty to help those in need. These ideals are the foundation of our unity as Americans, and that unity is a source of our strength. I hope that as we remember the terrible events of a decade ago, we will also pause to reflect on how that tragedy has brought us together as a people. just as that unity strengthened us in one of our greatest days of peril. It can give us the courage and shared purpose to deal with any challenge. I hope our commemoration today, and those like it all across the country, will inspire us to remember that we are truly one nation, one people, and that together we can overcome any challenge. Thank you so much for coming today, and may God bless America.